Hello, my name is Marianne Papenik-Miller. I'm a former chair and professor of the art department at the University of Montana in Missoula, and currently I'm professor and chair of the art department at DePaul University in Chicago. As a child, I grew up in the Chicago area, and we had I guess on a monthly basis, a visitor to our classroom, and this started in the 3rd grade. It's very clear in my mind. And these visitors were titled Picture Ladies. And they were volunteers and docents of the Art Institute of Chicago. And they would come to elementary classrooms in the Chicago vicinity, which was a fairly broad reach. And they would bring to our classroom a print of a piece that was in the Art Institute. So they would talk to us about it, got in our little bus, walked up the stairs to the Art Institute of Chicago and saw the real thing. And at that point, that changed my life. I remember it very clearly. This piece is titled Free Water Project, Jack and Jill. And it's a diptych, which means it's one work in 2 sections. And I thought I would talk a little bit about the idea of the work, because I don't want to necessarily present an answer to what the work is about. The title is a little bit of a clue to what the work is about, but then it's up to each one of you and each individual that's viewing the work to put all the images together and to come up with an idea of your own. So this particular piece, the way that I started on the work was thinking about water. Water sources, clean water in this country and globally are at risk. For various reasons. So this particular piece was actually started in Seattle, Washington. It takes me about 2 or 3 years to complete a work because I start them in layers. I'll have an initial idea, I'll take photographs, I'll work with various images, and then the piece will finish very often in a different place. So this particular piece was weathered outdoors in Washington, and Washington State. And you can see that there are passages of sticks and dirt and little patterns that were made because I take the paper and I will dig a nest, for lack of a better word, a very shallow hole in the ground, and then I put sheets of paper into the ground. And then I will put on top of that paper whatever I happen to have accessible, coffee, juice, sodas, and then I'll take a rake or a shovel and I'll sort of just cover it a little bit, almost like gardening with dirt. And then I'll let it sit outside for anywhere from 3 or 4 days to weeks. And I never quite know how the paper or the surface is going to respond to that. Some pieces come out. This piece, when I weathered it in Seattle, it was so beautiful with the dirt, and then there's also some powdered charcoal that I sifted on the piece that I really had to look at the paper for a year or 2 before I could even start to work on the piece. Then I start working on this particular piece from the back forward. Some pieces I'll work from the back forward and then the middle and the back and forth. But then the next layer is a photograph that I took of the Seattle, the locks, going through from Puget Sound, the locks that go through Lake Washington, where actually the salmon migrate through. There's a salmon ladder there, and I'm very fond of fish. I can't tell you why. But when I was teaching in Seattle, Washington, and the day wasn't going as a happy day, I would go to the locks very often. So it was a very special place. So there is this idea of water, and then as you move forward to the piece, Jack and Jill start to present themselves. And of course, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Which is a sort of a favorite sort of, I guess, childhood rhyme, maybe you would call it, which I find to be fun. So there are little bits and pieces of clues about water, about Jack and Jill, and Jack is sort of portrayed as the sort of the holiday soldier in 3 different views, and then Jill is a line drawing of a toy of the Statue of Liberty. And so if you take in mind the idea of water, and then you have the idea of Jack, and you have Jill, and then you have sort of the politics of America in 2005 when I completed this work, you can start to take little clues and bits and pieces of this work and start to form a story in your mind, which is what I hope the viewer will do. There's no answer to perceiving the works, there are questions. And so each person, I hope, will perceive different components. And then there are some fun little components, like this is a dancing Santa, a wooden toy object that I bought in the thrift store for 25 cents. And so in between Jack and Jill having a meeting, Santa's dancing through the pieces, kind of going, what's going on? And then there are images of animals and other little clues. Here's a little fish that I photographed at the Seattle Aquarium. And so there are lots of different layers throughout the piece. And so what I invite the viewer to do, and all of you to do, is to look at the works, think about the work, and then I invite you to come back. Because very often the idea of perception is about vision and knowledge, and your perception changes as you go back and forth and your life changes. I'll go back and look at artwork at the Art Institute of Chicago that I remember seeing as a third grader, now as an adult, and the pieces are familiar, they're like home, but they're different because my life is different. And so art has a way of changing with us. Is that enough? Okay.